All right, now teachers aren't supposed to have favorites, but this happens to be one of my favorite topics. Standard 3, solving rational functions, specifically by factoring by completing the square. So if I were to title my notes, I'd probably do it with completing the square. If you need more videos on this, just YouTube completing the square and you'll find tons. All right. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to put it in the form of ax squared, try that again, ax squared plus bx equals a number. And basically what I'm saying is you need to put the c on the other side if there is a number there. Now you can see in this case there is no plus c, so we're good to go. Next thing that I want you to do is identify your b. And in this case, your b is going to be equal to 10. So this basically says that we can take b and we can cut it in half and then square it. Okay, and that's going to give us a factored form. So let's do that. It's kind of confusing. So I'm going to take b, I'm going to cut it in half, and then I'm going to square it. I'm literally following this right here. I'm cutting it in half and then I'm squaring it. Okay, so that's going to give me 5 squared, which is 25. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 25 to both sides. So see how that's what I want to be right here. I'm going to have x squared plus 10x, and now I'm going to have a plus 25 here. And because I added 25 to this side, I have to add 25 to this side. So if you want me to write this more clearly, plus 25 plus 25. So I have equals 100. All right, now that I have this in the correct form. I have an x squared plus a bx. Remember, this is my 10 is my b. And then I forced this to be b divided by 2 squared, which I found to be 25. So this formula here tells me that this is going to be equal to the same thing as x plus b divided by 2 squared. Well, what is b divided by 2? Well, b divided by 2 is 10 divided by 2 is 5. So I basically can say that this b divided by 2 is 5. So I can rewrite this whole thing as x plus 5 quantity squared. And if you don't believe me that this is the same thing as this, you can actually FOIL it out and you'll see it is exactly the same. So all I've done is factor this by using this model, and that's going to be equal to still 100. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square root both sides. And I get a x plus 5 is equal to, what's the square root of 100? Well, that's going to be 10. But I'm also going to have an x plus 5 is equal to a negative 10. Remember, quadratics, we usually have 2 solutions. I'm going to subtract 5 from this one, and I get an x equals 10 minus 5 is 5. Okay, and then here I'm going to subtract 5 from this one, and I get x is equal to negative 15. All right, if you want, you can pause the video and check the as correct answers by plugging into the original. All right, on this next problem, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to identify my b as 4. And I checked that there wasn't a plus c here, so that step's already done. Now I have to find my b over 2 squared. So that's going to be 4 divided by 2 squared, which is going to give me 2 squared, which gives me 4. So I have to take this 4 and I have to add it to both sides. So that's going to give me an x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 16. All right, now I like to calculate b divided by 2. So b divided by 2 is simply, in this case, 4 divided by 2 is 2. Meaning that this entire thing can be factored to be x plus 2 squared. Okay, next step is going to be to square root both sides. That gives me an x plus 2 is equal to a positive 4, and an x plus 2 is equal to a negative 4. Subtract 2 from both sides. Bye-bye. I get x equals 2. And here I get an x equals -6. And again, if you want, you can pause this video, plug back into the original, and check your answer. So hopefully you're getting the hang of this, but this is kind of a new problem right here that has an extra step in the beginning. Remember in the very beginning of this tutorial, I said that this should be in the form ax squared plus bx, and then nothing here? Well, this is just going to be a first step where you just subtract 1 from both sides, just like that. So that disappears. I'm left with an x squared minus 4x is equal to 9. My b I'm going to identify as a -4. And so now I need to calculate b over 2 squared. So that's going to be -4 over 2 squared, which gives me a -2 squared, which gives me 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So now I'm going to have an x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 13. Okay, now I need to identify what b over 2 is. So that's going to be -4 over 2, which is equal to just a plain old -2. So now I'm going to factor it by taking that -2 and putting it right there. So I'll have this whole thing as an x minus 2 squared. And now this is certainly a little bit different from what you're used to. You're going to square root both sides. And let me give myself a little bit of space. Okay, so when I square root that, I'm going to be left with an x minus 2 is equal and an x minus 2 is equal. But this one's going to be a positive square root of 13, and this one's going to be a negative square root of 13. So when I add 2 here, and I know it looks funny and not really satisfying, but your answer is a 2 plus root 13. Here, when I add 2, I'm going to get an x equals 2 minus root 13. And those are my answers. All right, I think that's good enough. We'll certainly talk about this more in class. Don't forget your video problems.